Hello YouTube and welcome to Mesoamerica, your place for Mesoamerican magic, myth, and overall history. This episode is for mothers. Happy Mother's Day. And this episode is not as happy as I would like it to be. I want to speak to you about the Virgin of Guadalupe. The Virgin of Guadalupe for Mexicans is a revered icon slash spiritual source of wisdom, or whatever you want to call it. But what if the Virgin of Guadalupe was not called the Virgin of Guadalupe, was actually called Tonantzin? And all the titles the Virgin of Guadalupe is attributed with were the titles of Tonantzin. Why did we forget our great grandmother? And this is what this episode is all about. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining me. Let's go. The Mexican people have a great reverence for the Virgin of Guadalupe, to the point in which it is almost somehow supernatural the way they adore this particular Virgin. I have known people who have crawled or walked on their knees for miles and miles and miles from wherever they live to the Basilica of Guadalupe. In fact, my dad wanted to do that. He didn't do it. He was lazy. He revered the Virgin of Guadalupe, but he didn't do it. But he was supposed to walk from wherever we got a house to the particular basilica. And this is a tradition that many Mexicans have. On the day of Virgin of Guadalupe in November, there's a huge, gigantic gathering of people that bring in food and flowers and incense. People come in from many regions of Mexico. The Virgin of Guadalupe is adored more than Jesus or San Judas Tadeo or Santa Muerte, more than any other saint. For hundreds of years, the Virgin of Guadalupe has been the main focus of adoration for the Mexican people. But where did this Virgin of Guadalupe come from? According to Catholic tradition, the first apparition of Virgin of Guadalupe came from 1531 with an Indian called Juan Diego. They call him Indian. I'm calling him Indian, even though I don't like that term because we're not from India. We are from this continent. He apparently was of Aztec kind of Chichimecan tribes. And the story goes that he used to live north of Mexico City and had to go to Mexico City, and on his way there he had to go up the Mount of Tepeyac and down the Mount of Tepeyac every single day. That doesn't make any sense because the Mount of Tepeyac is not that big and it's actually quite easy to go around. But anyway, the story goes that in 1531 Juan Diego started listening and seeing the Virgin of Guadalupe. And the Virgin of Guadalupe was asking him to build her a chapel. This Indian, of course, didn't have any power, being under the control of New Spain, Mexico being under the control of New Spain. And the Virgin of Guadalupe told the Indian, in quotes, Juan Diego, to go speak with the local parishioners, the local fathers there. Of course, the fathers initially supposedly didn't pay any attention to him. In my opinion, that's not the way it would have gone down. If there's an Indian staring the people and saying that he's seeing apparitions of a particular deity, that Indian will have gotten killed. But anyway, let's follow along with the story, with the original made-up story. So Juan Diego went the third time and he brought roses. It was supposed to be winter and there were not supposed to be roses in Tepeyac, and so the priests were supposedly amazed at the fact that this Indian had roses in his tunic, and the tunic itself had the image of Virgin of Guadalupe. I find this story extremely racist and very difficult to believe. Number one, because Indians' lives back then to the Spanish were worthless. They were just slaves. They really didn't have that much of a free will or a way to really make a life out of themselves. And so if Juan Diego had been walking from one place to the other to either go trade stuff, he would have been captured by the Spanish and been made a servant of a particular house if they liked them. But then again, let's go back to the tunic of the Virgin of Guadalupe. The tunic of Virgin of Guadalupe, it is obviously made in the image of European art in that era. There's a lot of European art that was made around this era that was dedicated for churches. And this story is obviously a BS story to cover up the true intentions of the Catholic Church. And then not even mention what really happened on the Hill of Tepeyac. The tradition of the Native Americans, particularly Mesoamericans, of finding spirits on top of hills or on rivers goes very far back. We have many of these stories told in many different ways, and many miracles have happened. And on the top of the mount or the hill of Tepeyac was where the temple of the goddess Tonantzin lived. Of course, this temple was destroyed, and the chapel of Virgin of Guadalupe was placed on his behalf. The chapel of the Virgin of Guadalupe was built in 1641. Which was 100 years after, supposedly, Juan Diego saw his vision and the Catholic friars and fathers told them that they were going to build one. And so, first of all, the chronology doesn't make sense. But what does make sense is why did they have to do it? Why all the way to the mid-1600s? The Aztecs had a very traumatic transition from the old Aztec Empire to the new empire of New Spain. But on the way there, they had to lose their religion, they had to lose their language, they had to lose their traditions, they had to lose the way in which they lived their lives, the ways they planted, the way they commerce, the way they transported themselves. They basically became slaves, but the Spanish never really quite called them slaves because they didn't want anybody else, the Dutch or the English or the French, or the Portuguese on top of them. And as a result, they just kind of hid whatever they needed to hide in order to operate their way they wanted to operate, to make themselves rich, and in the way exploiting and killing a lot of the native population. And when I say killing, I don't mean only physical killing. It was culturally killing. And this is what is happening right now. When we replace the Virgin of Tonantzin, who was a central figure for the Aztec religion, and this in Aztec religion, I'm talking about the common people religion, because Tonantzin was not really a royal goddess. The royal the gods for the kings of the Aztecs were, of course, Huitzilopochtli, Quetzalcoatl, Tlaloc, Tezcatlipoca. They were the big, gigantic gods. But Tonantzin was considered to be a minor goddess, but a very important one nonetheless, because Tonantzin was seen as a daily offering, daily prayer type of goddess, as opposed to like a creator goddess or creator god that had all these different powers. And to be able to understand Tonantzin, even though we have absolutely almost no record of Tonantzin, we can understand her by the names that she went by. She went by Our Lady, which is today what they call the Virgin of Guadalupe, Our Lady. She also went by the Great Grandmother or the Great Mother. She also went by the Flower of Life. She also went by Mother Snake. And this last one is very interesting because there was a Virgin of Guadalupe in Spain, and the Virgin of Guadalupe in Spain was known for killing snakes. And so it seems that the Spanish not only they transposed the Virgin of Guadalupe for Tonantzin, but really wanted to mock the Virgin of the goddess of Tonantzin for killing her, kind of like the Virgin of Guadalupe is killing the mother snake. And the snake was not necessarily an evil animal like we see it today. The snake for the Aztecs was a creature of reverence and wisdom, and also of perseverance, and sometimes you have to be like a little slyness. which was very important for the common people of the Aztecs. The Aztecs, common people, didn't have a lot of rights. The government kind of functioned like communism, where the people in power were the ones that controlled everything, and the poor people were just the subjects that were ordered to do certain things and were afforded certain rights and privileges and food based on their performance. And so the Virgin of Tonantzin was viewed as a mother. And for people like the Aztecs, that they lost mothers when the Spanish came, and even before. The Aztec life before the Spanish was also not, roses and daisies. It was very difficult for the common people. When the Spanish came, it was basically just like kind of like, we didn't come here to conquer, we're just like changing the administration. The Aztec king was a pretty ruthless king to his subjects, and the Spanish were even worse. Not only because they exploited them and killed them, but also because they transformed their lives and their way of being. It's kind of like being taken to, a pack of wolves and be ordered to, follow the rules of the wolves, as opposed to like follow our rules of like going to a home or going to work. It was a huge transition for these people. And losing their mother goddess was certainly a traumatic experience that they refused to do, and this must have cost a lot of lives. And as a result, probably the Spanish devised a way to not lose their servants or their slaves, and just kind of transpose their beliefs of Our Lady Tonantzin to Our Lady Virgin of Guadalupe. And along came other different types of traditions where to this day they're not lost. To this day, they're still on November. People still go to the bottom of the Hill of Tepeyac. People don't go to the top of the Hill of Tepeyac anymore. Now they go to the bottom because people don't fit, but I think it's because of other reasons. There have been many visions that people still have by visiting the top of the Hill of Tepeyac. They still hear voices, and they still see things that they're not supposed to see. if you get my drift. And as a result, now the Catholic Church has the people gather at the bottom of the hill. And there at the bottom of the hill, they're able to offer their incense. They bring flowers, they bring food for the people, they have huge celebrations. They still celebrate a goddess that they don't know, and they only have known as the Virgin of Guadalupe, who is a painting that has replaced a mythological goddess that still to this day accomplishes miracles without us even knowing her name. And that is still part of the Mexican tradition, which I think is a horrible act of psychological violence, because it's like they take away your mother and they replace it with something else, and to manipulate your identity and manipulate your self-worth. Because of course, if you see this European art as divine, you're going to think, oh well, then the Europeans, and they are divine and we're just still Indians, unquotes, even though they're not Indians. They were either called Aztecs or Otomi or whatever you want to call them, but they're not Indians. Indians are from India. Anyway, so I hope this hasn't been such a traumatic or sad episode, but I think that this is important for us to know. It is important for us to value our mothers, for us to value who we are as individuals, who are our ancestors, for us to treasure their works, and to know where do our traditions come from, and why do we do the things that we do, not because somebody tells us that we need to do them, but because of the love that we have for that particular goddess, even though we don't know her name. Anyway, my name is Jorge Quiñones. Thank you very much. Thank you for liking. Thank you for subscribing. If you can please share this episode, I will really appreciate it. I don't do this for money. I do this to try to expand Mesoamerican culture and to try to bring an appreciation to our culture and tradition. And hopefully some of you guys who are not Mesoamerican, you can learn something and you can appreciate where we're coming from, and hopefully you can support us. Thank you very much and have a great one. Bye-bye.